My parents cut me off and removed me from their will because I'm not their biological. My own parents disowned me, cutting me out of their lives and their will, all because I wasn't their biological child. The betrayal was a deep wound, but what happened next, an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative, didn't just change my life, it revealed the true colors of everyone I thought was family. My life shattered when I was 14. That's when my mom remarried, bringing a new man, Tom, and his 17-year-old son, Jake, into our home. Right away, a suffocating tension settled over us. It started small, the way strangers awkwardly navigate shared spaces. Jake would leave his dirty dishes in the sink, obviously expecting them to magically clean themselves. But guess who always got the lecture from Mom or Tom about the kitchen mess? Me. Or my expensive shampoo would vanish at an alarming rate, only for me to find Jake strutting around with perfectly styled hair, clearly a result of my favorite product. It was more than just Jake's annoying antics, though. Tom, my new stepfather, consistently treated me like the problem. Whenever something went wrong, he'd pin it on me without even asking. And Mom? She was so obsessed with making this new family dynamic work that she just couldn't see what was happening. She'd brush it off, cover for Jake, and pretend everything was fine. I felt the shift, the difference in expectations, immediately. Then, about a year into this difficult new life, Mom and Tom announced they were expecting a baby. And that's when everything truly changed. Suddenly, the entire world revolved around the impending newborn. The house needed renovations, and guess which room was chosen for the nursery? Mine. I was unceremoniously shoved into a cramped, claustrophobic guest room, barely enough space for my things. It felt like a demotion, a stark, painful reminder of my place in this new family structure. A few months later, Nathan, my new half-brother, arrived, instantly becoming the universe's center. Jake, already entitled, now felt even more so. He dropped out of college and moved back home, bringing with him a constant whirlwind of late-night parties and questionable friends who materialized and vanished at all hours. Tom would dismiss my frustrated protests about the noise and the mess with a wave of his hand, while my mother would just give me a sorrowful look, as if to say, "What can we do?" It was infuriating. I started spending every spare moment at friends' houses, anywhere I could find a semblance of routine or peace. School became my only escape, my sanctuary. I stayed as late as possible, joining every club, taking extra classes. It wasn't just adolescent defiance, it was pure survival. Home became a place where I constantly felt like I was walking on eggshells, bracing for the next explosion. It was suffocating. One evening, I came home later than usual, to an eerily silent house. A note on the refrigerator informed me they'd gone out to dinner. Without me, I hadn't even been invited to what was supposed to be a family supper. That note hit harder than I expected. I felt utterly invisible, a ghost in my own home, and the sting of it was unbearable. Everything almost broke, shattered, just after my 18th birthday. Tom clearly resented me having any reason to leave the house, even though I worked a part-time job to save for my future. He'd repeatedly tell me it would jeopardize my academic progress, but I knew his real motive was just to have me around to criticize. Then, one horrifying evening, I came home to find my room utterly trashed. Jake, it turned out, had hosted a wild party while Mom and Tom were out, and my space bore the brunt of it. A broken lamp, alcohol stains smeared across my crucial project documentation. It was an outright, sickening breach of my privacy. The next morning, at breakfast, I confronted them. Tom's response was chillingly cold, laced with contempt. "You should have been more responsible with your belongings," he sneered, as if I was somehow to blame. My mother just sighed, whispering something about families coming together and letting things go. But I was done. I had finished letting things pass. Every single thing I did felt scrutinized, but not out of concern. It felt like they were just waiting for me to make a mistake so they could point fingers. Jake, who'd effectively become a professional couch potato, seemed to get away with everything. And while Nathan, my little half-brother, was still a child, the sheer amount of coddling he received made it painfully clear who the favorite was. I remember one time I was working on a huge science project, something I was genuinely passionate about. But working on it at home was impossible. I craved silence, so I set up a makeshift workstation in the corner of the living room. It felt like I was trying to build something delicate in the heart of Times Square. Eventually, I just couldn't take it anymore. Jake would blast his music, Nathan would run around screaming, and Tom would constantly complain about how my project was taking up too much space or making a mess. After packing up my supplies, I went to a friend's house. Their parents kindly allowed me to work in their tranquil dining room. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could actually concentrate. That's when the stark reality of how messed up my home life had become truly hit me. My friend simply said, "You're always welcome here." It was such a simple invitation, yet it meant everything to me. For me, home was just a place I couldn't wait to escape. Home is supposed to be a secure refuge, a sanctuary, but every hour I spent away from mine helped me breathe a little easier. I started picking up extra shifts at my job, saving every penny. Of course, Tom didn't like it. He'd frequently lecture me about my job being a distraction from school. But I knew why he really disliked it. I wasn't around as much for him to pick apart and critique. As my savings grew, the idea of moving out began to solidify in my mind. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and my mother and Tom seemed incapable of dealing with the situation. But the more I thought about it, the more it became the only option to regain control of my own life. Moving out, I found a modest, fairly priced apartment near my campus, and from my part-time job, I'd saved just enough to cover the first 3 months' rent. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The prospect of having my own space, my own life, kept me focused. One evening, after a tense dinner, I gathered Tom and Mom at the kitchen table. My heart was pounding, but I tried to keep my voice steady. I looked them both in the eye and simply said, "I'm moving out." The room fell silent, the air thick with mounting tension. You could have heard a pin drop. Tom was the first to react. He actually smiled, shaking his head, as if I'd just uttered the most ridiculously naive thing imaginable. "You think you're ready to live on your own just because of your age?" His voice dripped with a mocking disbelief. My mother initially said nothing. She just sat there, staring down at the table, her expression utterly unreadable. "I am ready," I insisted, trying to project more confidence than I truly felt. The disagreement quickly escalated into a full-blown argument when I reiterated that I had found my own place and had enough savings. Tom went on a rampage, accusing me of being selfish, unappreciative, and trying to shirk my responsibilities at home. "He looks up to you, he added, trying to weaponize Nathan, to guilt me into staying in what was clearly a hazardous atmosphere for my mental health. My mother's response was calmer, but no less devastating. She didn't argue with me like Tom, nor did she attempt to stop me. She just continued to complain, saying things like, "Families stick together," and "You'll regret it if you leave." But I knew better. This wasn't about family, it was about control. I stood my ground, not just because I desired my own space, but because I desperately needed it for my emotional and psychological well-being. I felt like a permanent outsider in my supposed home. I was exhausted from being held accountable for things beyond my control, from trying to squeeze myself into a family that had made it glaringly obvious I wasn't truly a part of it. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Every item I packed into a box felt like a step closer to independence. It wasn't easy. On the morning I was scheduled to leave, my mother quietly entered my room. I braced myself for another confrontation, another battle, but it never happened. Instead, she helped me pack discreetly. Our conversation was brief, almost superficial. She asked if I needed extra boxes, offered old utensils. We both seemed to be actively avoiding the elephant in the room, making light talk to avoid admitting that this was the definitive end of something. Later that day, when I finally locked the door to my new flat, an unfamiliar spectrum of emotions washed over me. Relief, grief, excitement, and a surge of overwhelming worry. I was now living completely on my own. It felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying. The first few nights were the hardest. The flat seemed overwhelmingly empty and quiet. I even found myself longing for the disagreeable sounds of home. Jake's loud music, Nathan running around, Tom's incessant nagging. But as the days passed into weeks, I grew to cherish the silence. For the first time in years, I could actually breathe. I no longer had to tiptoe around the house, constantly worried about Tom's mood swings, or whether Jake had hosted another chaotic party. I could come and go as I pleased, eat when I wanted, and sleep uninterrupted. It felt like I was finally discovering who I was, beyond the suffocating insanity of my family. This was a new kind of freedom. Life rapidly found its groove. I balanced work, education, and maintaining my modest apartment. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. My connection with my mother and Tom improved slightly after I moved out. Keeping my distance actually made things easier. I saw them occasionally, but the emotional buffer helped. Then, out of the blue, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was muted, lighter than normal, almost too casual. "Tom's been thinking about his will," she added, as if discussing the weather. "He wants to make sure everything is in order." I reacted hesitantly, not sure where this was going. After a pause, she delivered the crushing blow. "He has decided to include Jake and Nathan, but not you. Because they are his biological children. He believes it is more rational." There it was. It stung. Deeply. While I hadn't expected much from Tom, hearing it stated so bluntly hurt me more than I could have ever anticipated. It wasn't about the money, it was about the message. A cold, hard reminder that despite all these years, I was still not considered a member of their family. I forced myself to answer neutrally. "I understand, Mom." Maybe sensing the raw hurt, she hastily tried to ease the impact. "You understand this is just legal things, it doesn't impact our feelings for you, right?" Even though I didn't believe her for a second, I allowed the conversation to divert. But the harm was already done. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, that familiar, gnawing sense of not belonging eating at me. A part of me wanted to confront Tom, to demand an explanation, to simply tell him how deeply it hurt. But another, wiser part of me questioned the point. For years, that family hadn't felt like a part of me, so why should it matter now? Ultimately, I decided to back off. I reduced my visits, stayed busy with school and work, and spent more time cultivating relationships with people who actually appreciated me. Friends, instructors, coworkers who loved me for who I was, not for what I could contribute or because we had once shared a home. These were the individuals that truly mattered. The anguish from Tom's will and years of feeling like an outsider slowly began to recede. It wasn't an overnight metamorphosis, but the sharp edges of the pain subsided, though it would occasionally flare up, especially at family events when I saw Jake and Nathan relishing in the spotlight. I began to realize that some things were simply beyond my control. I started establishing my own family, my own sense of belonging. A few months later, Tom recovered from his health scare, and their lives resumed to normal. Then came the actual test. I was invited to a family dinner to celebrate Tom's recovery. I went not out of choice, but out of a sense of obligation. The evening was just as awkward as I expected. Tom talked endlessly about his recuperation. Everyone gushed about Nathan's newest academic accomplishments, and Jake boasted about some new job he had miraculously landed. I sat there, relatively silent, and it was painfully obvious that I was the odd one out. But this time it stung less. I had come to terms with my status in the family. I was the outsider, yes, but there were individuals in my life who cared for me, for myself, not because of family obligation or shared DNA. I made an excuse about an early start and left shortly after dinner. As I drove home, I felt a profound weight lift from my shoulders. "I'm good," I told myself. Really good. I had dealt with the emotional impact, faced the harsh truth of my situation, and emerged stronger and more confident in myself than ever before. For the first time in years, I felt true peace. But life, as it often does, had another surprise in store. Just when I thought I had finally achieved some calm and routine, everything turned upside down again. If you're still with me on this roller coaster of a story, and you're finding yourself nodding along, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. More wild, unbelievable stories are always on the way. One afternoon, completely out of the blue, I received a call from a lawyer I'd never heard of. His tone was courteous, professional, but laced with an almost apologetic hesitancy. "Am I speaking with Jessica Evans?" he inquired. "Yes, that's me," I replied, bewildered. "I'm calling about Margaret Evans, your great-aunt," he explained, his voice slow and measured. "She passed away recently and named you as the sole beneficiary of her estate." For a long moment, I simply fell silent. Aunt Margaret? I couldn't even recall her clearly. She was one of those distant relatives you'd hear whispers about, but never truly knew. I vaguely remembered my father mentioning her once or twice as someone who had helped raise him, but I hadn't seen her in years, probably since I was a tiny child. And now I was being told she'd left everything to me? "I'm sorry for your loss," the lawyer said, breaking the stunned silence. "She was a remarkable woman." Still reeling, I blurted out a thank you. Then, half expecting it to be something simple, perhaps an old house or a few family heirlooms, I asked, "Exactly what did she leave behind?" "Your great-aunt was quite well off," he replied. "Over the years, she made some excellent investments. The estate contains various properties, a significant stock portfolio, and a trust fund worth approximately $3 million. My heart literally stopped. I sat there, gripping my phone, my mind screaming, why me? We weren't even close. I'd visited her a few times when I was younger, but our relationship was never genuinely strong. My mind couldn't fully grasp it. The attorney then added, "She left a letter for you. I will forward it along with the other documents." She goes into more detail regarding her decision there. After we hung up, I just sat there, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of everything. Why did Aunt Margaret choose me to inherit everything? I barely knew her. Was this some kind of mistake? The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings with the attorney, signing paperwork, and truly discovering the extent of what I had inherited. Beyond the money, there were houses, stocks, and personal belongings that painted a picture of a life I'd known nothing about. Aunt Margaret's letter, however, impacted me most deeply. In it, she stated that she had always admired my independence and saw in me a reflection of herself at my age. She described me as determined, self-sufficient, and capable of creating a life on my own, qualities she thought she had lacked when she was younger. She wanted to offer me the opportunity to use her riches for something meaningful. It was overwhelming. Here was this relative I barely knew, who saw something in me that my own family had never noticed. She appreciated me. She chose me. My immediate impulse was to buy a small home. It wasn't lavish, but it was mine, a tangible representation of this new chapter. For long-term financial security, I also acquired a rental property and invested the remaining funds, consulting with a financial expert to ensure I made sound judgments. It all felt so surreal. In the span of a week, my life had utterly transformed. I no longer had to scrape by or wonder how I would make ends meet. For the first time, I felt truly secure and free. However, this new freedom brought a new set of challenges. At first, I didn't notify anyone about the bequest, not even my closest relatives. Given our tumultuous past, I knew the news would not be well received, and frankly, I owed them nothing. But secrets have a way of getting out, and mine was no exception. It started with a cousin I hadn't seen in years, who somehow heard about the inheritance through legal channels. My mother found out before I did, and the rest of the family soon followed suit. The phone calls started almost immediately. First, my mother called, her tone unusually cheerful and inquisitive. She showered me with compliments, then casually mentioned how financially difficult things had been for her and Tom lately. I immediately sensed where the conversation was heading, and sure enough, the floodgates erupted. Tom called next, then Jake, and then some distant cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Each one, in their own unique way, intimated that they needed a piece of my inheritance. "Times are tough," they'd say. My mother even commented, "You know how bad Tom's health has been," as if this explained their sudden, newfound interest in me. They all seemed to have forgotten about me, but only as a possible ATM. I was utterly overwhelmed with requests for money, loans, and gifts. It felt like vultures were circling, waiting for their turn to swoop down. For a brief period, I felt completely overwhelmed. I even considered giving in, questioning whether holding on to the bequest was selfish. But then I remembered all the years I'd spent feeling like an outsider in my own family, being blamed, discarded, and ignored. I had worked tirelessly to earn whatever I had before this windfall. I had gotten through college on my own, without their help. And now that I finally had some stability, they wanted to take it away? When I was struggling, none of them had volunteered to help. When my mother eventually inquired why I hadn't told her about the bequest sooner, I finally found the strength to reject the guilt and manipulation. I softly, but firmly, explained to her that our separation had been both emotional and physical. I had been kept away, ignored, and alienated for years, made to feel as if I belonged nowhere in the family. This inheritance, I explained, allowed me to live on my own, without relying on anybody else. "It is my life," I assured her, "and I must live it in my own manner. I apologize if this offends you, but right now, I need to act in my best interests." The outcome of that conversation was worse than I could have predicted. Mom accused me of being arrogant and inconsiderate. Tom interjected, chastising me about how families should treat one another. Nonetheless, I stood my ground. Over time, the calls became less frequent, and the demands for money ceased when they understood I would not give in. It was challenging, excruciatingly so, but absolutely necessary. I had realized a sad, painful reality about family. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who bring you down. Knowing that I had protected myself brought me a quiet calm. Finally, I decided not to let them dictate my life. This inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about taking control of my own destiny, and more importantly, gaining the ability to live my life on my own terms. My communication with them became strained, but I'd become accustomed to it. Their approval was no longer required, and I was not bound to offer them anything. I had friends, mentors, and people who actually cared about me, not because of familial obligations, but because of who I was. Then, the biggest surprise came from the most unexpected source, my younger half-brother, Nathan. I unexpectedly received a clumsy, handwritten note from him. "I'm sorry for asking for money. I miss you," he wrote in his untidy handwriting. Though small, this step meant a lot to me. Nathan, barely 14, was reaching out in his own way. After that, we started texting, little conversations about his school and interests, nothing too serious, but it was something. It was the start of a modest bridge between us. Even though I wasn't optimistic about reconciling with the rest of the family, I was creating a life for myself, free of need from anyone else. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. However, the impression of tranquility was fleeting. Just as I thought things had settled down, my mother contacted me again a few weeks after Nathan's letter. This time, she wanted to talk things over. I could tell this wasn't going to be a chat about reconnecting or finding common ground, so I agreed to see her in public at a nearby cafe, hoping to keep things civil. The vibe was unsettling from the start. She rarely inquired about my life or how I was doing. Instead, she got straight into how difficult things had been financially since Tom's health crisis, and how Nathan's private school fees were stacking up. I sat there listening, feeling like an outsider in her litany of troubles. It quickly became evident why she had requested to meet. She even added that they were thinking of upgrading the house, and that she really needed a vacation to relieve her stress. It was clear she was not there to heal our relationship. She was there for one single, explicit reason. Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer. I cut through the tension, saying, "Mom, just get to the point." She looked me in the eye and said, without hesitation, "I expect you to write me a check for $1 million. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me?" I asked incredulously. She did not waver. "It is only fair. Technically, since it came from your father's side of the family, all of that money should have been mine." I was utterly shocked. Her entitlement and audacity were astonishing. She sat there, casually demanding $1 million as if it was her birthright. "I'm not giving you $1 million, I said bluntly, trying to keep my voice steady. Her tone instantly moved from entitled to plain angry, and her expression became severe. "You have always been unappreciative of everything we've done for you," she spat, her remarks painting me as a criminal for not handing over the money she claimed she was owed. Without turning back, I paid for my coffee and left the cafe. It still surprises me that my own mother would attempt to guilt me into giving her money to which she had absolutely no right. What followed was even worse. A few days later, my mother started circulating malicious rumors. She informed everybody who would listen that I had stolen the inheritance, claiming it was rightfully hers, and accused me of hoarding it out of greed. Suddenly, relatives I hadn't heard from in years began calling, either to support her outrageous claims or to pressure me into sharing the money. The hypocrisy was staggering, especially given that Tom had omitted me from his own will because I wasn't family. Even Tom got involved, writing me a long, guilt-ridden text about how I needed to consider the family and make more inclusive decisions. I reacted with a single, brutal sentence. "You didn't include me in your will because I'm not family, remember that?" That shut him up for a while, but the drama did not end there. Things got truly heated when I received an official-looking letter in the mail. To my utter amazement, my mother was suing me. Yes, you read that correctly. She was suing me for a share of the inheritance, claiming that as my father's widow, she was entitled to a large amount of the money. I was stunned. Was my own mother dragging me to court? I couldn't believe it. At first, I was afraid, expecting a protracted and costly court battle. I called my attorney, who actually laughed after reading the letter. "This is a joke," he remarked, flinging the letter onto his desk. "The will is airtight." He next investigated the so-called attorney who had sent the letter. The phone number was disconnected, and the address on the letterhead was for a decrepit building under construction. It became evident that my mother and Tom had engaged a dodgy, most certainly fraudulent lawyer, in a last-ditch, desperate attempt to terrify me into paying them money. While I was relieved that the lawsuit was unfounded, I was also terribly disappointed. Their willingness to go to such lengths for my inheritance was surprising, even for them. They had tried guilt-tripping, manipulating, and now they were making direct legal threats. I was done attempting to salvage any sort of relationship with them. I understood, unequivocally, that I needed significant distance. After the legal jitters passed, the emotional toll hit me hard. I was exhausted, sleep-deprived, and the constant drama was severely affecting my mental health. That was when I realized I desperately needed a vacation from everything. After talking with some of my friends, we decided to take a road trip. Nothing extravagant, just a journey to a couple of spots we'd always wanted to go but never got around to. It was just what I needed. Time to clear my mind, escape the chaos, and most importantly, consider what I truly wanted for my future. As we began the road, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in such a little period. A year ago, I was barely making it, suffocating in a house that never truly felt like home. Now, I had financial security, my own home, and the freedom to make my own judgments without interference from others. It felt liberating, yet also bittersweet. Growing up, I had looked to my mother and stepfather for guidance and encouragement. To me, family meant having someone who would always have your back, no matter what. But through it all, I learned a terrible, profound lesson. Just because someone is family by blood does not guarantee they are there for you in the ways that truly matter. Throughout the trip, I reflected a lot and realized that I didn't need their money, their validation, or their acceptance. I had everything I needed, and the relationships I actually valued were those I had formed with people who loved me for who I was, not what I could offer them. In countless little ways, my friends, colleagues, and even Nathan expressed more genuine care for me than my mother or Tom ever did. Following the trip, I decided to write letters to each family member who had attempted to influence me. I did it for me, not for them. It was my way of achieving closure, of expressing what I couldn't say in the heat of the moment. In those letters, I detailed how their actions had harmed me, and how despite my desire to be a member of the family, I was constantly pushed aside. I wished them well and hoped they would move on, just as I had. The only reaction I received came from Nathan. His letter was modest but sincere. I appreciate you delivering the letter. I miss you. Let's get together sometime. It wasn't much, but it was the beginning. Nathan and I might one day develop something real, free of obligation or manipulation. As for the rest of the family, I had finally accepted that we were better off at a distance. The inheritance had served as a wake-up call, not just a financial boon, but also a revelation about my true family. It wasn't the folks who raised me. It was those who supported me when I had nothing to offer but myself. Looking back, I don't have any regrets. I stayed firm, safeguarded my future, and found peace by letting go of the poisonous connections that had been holding me back. Life has a peculiar way of teaching us what is actually essential, and I'm glad for that, no matter how harsh the lessons were. Sitting in my own home, surrounded by people who feel more like family than my actual relatives ever did, I know I'm precisely where I should be. This journey taught me that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment when you realized you had to prioritize your own well-being over family ties? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.